Hi everyone, my name is Mark Moikins from Big Mountain Studio, and today we're going to learn something really cool. We're going to learn about the core animation emitter. And what the emitter does is it is responsible for creating images and then sending them out. And that's actually the definition of the word emit. It means to produce something or to create something and then send it out, such as a volcano emits smoke or a fire emits smoke. It creates the smoke and then sends it out. So that's sort of like what the emitter does here, is it creates all these little images that you see falling down and sends them out. And there's a lot of cool things that you can do with this emitter, this core animation emitter. And I'm going to show you a little bit of what you can do, including what I have going on here. Okay, so just a little background on what is this application that I built. Well, what it is, there's a website called Dibble, and it has 3 B's. And that's the one thing that you have to remember about this company. It's Dibble.com, and it's a great place, a great source for you to go to for UI inspiration or user experience inspiration. If you're looking for some way to make your app look better, you can go to Dibble.com and do searches for like mobile UI or mobile design, mobile user experience. I've been using it for a long time and I love it. What you can do also is you can like what people have created, and then you can also take the things that you like and put them into buckets so you can go back to them and look them up later. But what you can't do after you create an account, what you can't do is post your designs or comment on other people's designs. It's this thing that Dibble has set up where you can join, but you can't post anything until you get what's called an invite, a Dibble invite. And that is why I created this little design here in Xcode, because it's kind of like a tradition where when someone gets an invite from Dibble, they create a hello Dibble or a thank you Dibble, something like that as their first design that they post. And I got a Dibble invite thanks to David Anspaugh, and he's on Dibble. He's currently on Dibble. So what Dibble does is they actually send invites to all of their existing users, and those existing users can then pass on those invites to their friends or other designers that they know. And that's what David did for me. So thank you, David, for that. And if you want to see his work, you can go to Dibble.com and look up his name. And as you can see, he's got a lot of great stuff. He's done UI work and as well as icons and logos. So very talented. So I look forward to getting into Dibble and starting to post UI designs, and as well as tutorials on how to create those designs in a mobile application. Okay, now let's take a look at this emitter. So I have the application set up, and why are these things all broken up? Well, these are some of the beginning animations that I do. And if I run the application right from the beginning, you can see these animations that I've done. We're not going to cover these animations. I've covered a lot of animations in some of my previous videos. So what I want to focus on here today is just the emitter. So you see Dibble spelled with 2 B's, but I put the 3rd B in there, and then the E and the O kind of blink at you. And then we're going to have the emitter, start showing the basketballs, the white basketballs falling down from the sky here. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have and see where we're going to do this. Minimize this here. So here's all the existing animation that I have right now. And right at the last animation, which is this function right here, wink hello, I'm going to call this function to have it snow. That's what I just called it. Snow Dibble balls. So then they're just basically the basketballs, but it's Dibble's icon is that basketball. And so I want it to snow from the top and come down lightly like snow. But what I want to make clear here is an emitter does not just have things fall from the sky and come down. You can actually have an emitter produce these objects, these images, from any direction. So you can put an emitter right in the middle of your UI and have it go out in all directions. But we're not going to do that. We're going to have it snow. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create my emitter. It is a core animation emitter layer. Like that. Okay, now a layer. There's this word again, layer. Now you might know that all objects, all UI objects, have layers in them. And you can even see an example here. Like if I just create, well, okay, we have a view that we know that's a UI view. And every view controller has a root view. And if I click on here, I see there's a layer. So every view comes with one layer, at least one layer. And layers work just like graphics applications. You can have many layers stacked on top of each other to produce different effects. And it's the same thing with a UI view. UI views can have many layers, including an emitter layer. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to actually take the existing view, like if we look at this existing view right here, we're going to take this view and we're going to add another layer to it that will have the little basketball icons snowing down from the top. Okay, so what you have to do is after you create your emitter, you actually have to position it. Because remember, I said you can have an emitter right in the middle of your view and have it go out in all different directions. But what we want to do is we want to put it at the top and have it emit only in one direction going down. So what we'll do is let's set up the position of our emitter. There's a property here called emitter position, the position of the center of the particle emitter. And so now that's important that it's when you position it, you're not setting the X and Y coordinate, like a frame. You're setting the center of the emitter. And so that is it's a CG point. And a CG point is basically just an XY coordinate. Well, I guess I said it wasn't an XY coordinate, but it is an XY coordinate. But what I meant was it's not like the XY of a frame. So it's not like a square and you're positioning the upper left-hand corner to XY coordinates. No, it's an XY position, but it's the center. Okay, now we know that we're going for the X position, that's the horizontal position. We want it right in the center, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our view, the frame, and the width. And we're going to take that width and divide it by 2, and that will give us the center of our screen. Now for the Y position, Y controls the up and down position, the vertical position. We can just keep that right at 0, which is right at the top of our screen, because that's where our objects are going to come from. And then the next thing we want to do is you can actually control the size of your emitter. So we have to give our emitter a size, because right now we've only told it where the center is. And when objects are created and produced by this emitter, it's going to come from the whole object. So right now our object is just one dot. So if we, if we did this now, we would just have little basketballs coming right from the center of the screen right up here. And then we'll just have like one line of basketballs come down. But so what we want to do is we want to make this emitter like the size of our the width of our view, right up at top. If you can imagine a bar right up at the top of this screen, that's the size we want our emitter to be. Okay, so let's create that. Oh, I did position twice, didn't I? Now we want size, emitter size. And for that, now let's take a look at that. It's not a, there's no quick help. Yeah, there we go. So you see it's a CG size. This is just what I wanted to show you. So it's not like a frame. We have the center, and the size is just going to be height and width. That's all it's going to be. So let's go with some nice round numbers here. And the width will be the same as the width of our view. And the height, I don't think that here the height really matters. I'll just give it like 2 points. It could probably just even be 1. Okay, so we have our emitter built, and we have the center point, and we have the size. Okay, that's good. Now what we want to do is, after we have it, we want to add it to our layer, to our views layer. Because remember, it's just all it is just another layer. And so you can add multiply layers by using this right here. You can also add layers either by adding a sublayer or inserting a sublayer like this. If you want a layer to be above or below an existing layer, or you can tell it to be at a certain position, like 0, 1, 2, 3. But we're just going to add it. And then we'll add our emitter right there. Okay, so we get the start here. We created our emitter, we created the size of the position, and we added it to the view. But we haven't really told it what to emit. We haven't told it how fast to emit or how many to create. All these things we have to set up. And so that's a lot of code. But what I want to do is, instead of setting it up here, I want to put it into a separate file, because once you have this set up in a separate file, a separate class, it really allows you to be able to reuse it in future projects. You can just take that class, bring it into another project, and reuse it easily. So that's actually what I want to do. So I'm not going to create an emitter here. Instead, I'm going to create a function. Well, let's create our class first. And I'll just, I'm going to stick it in this resource file or folder here. My resources is kind of like where I have my images and my designables. So let's create a new file. And it's just going to be a simple Swift class. I'm not going to create like a custom class or anything. And I'll just simply call it emitter. Okay, the emitter will need the UI kit, so I'm just going to replace that foundation with UI kit. And let's just create our class, name it the same as our file, emitter. Okay, good. Now what I'm going to do here is, I don't want to instantiate this class and then set some properties and then return an emitter. Instead, what I'm going to do is just create static functions. And we'll keep it simple. We'll say like a get emitter or create emitter, something like that. So get an emitter. So when you call it, it'll be emitter.get, right? Oh, and we actually want it to return a core animation emitter. Like that. Okay, something's wrong. What is the problem here? Expected declaration. Oh, yeah. Okay, maybe if I had the function keyword in there. All right. So in here, I'm going to create my emitter. My emitter layer. Actually, this is wrong. It should be layer, right? Yeah. Okay, just like that. And then we're going to return that emitter. Now in here, there's something else that I didn't include. I'm still going to, in my view controller down here, I'm still going to keep this in here, because if you use it in other projects, the position and size, those are most likely going to change. What I want to put in my class are things that most likely won't change, or the things that I need to change, I'll pass it in. So for here, another thing that I'll need to create, and you might want to keep this outside of your class, but for this tutorial, I'm going to put it inside my class, is emitter also has a thing called a emitter shape. Where is it here? Shape. There it is. It's a constant. And if we look up CAEmitter, you can see that there's many different shapes here that you can create. And this is part of the reason why you're kind of like setting that center position. Remember, you just set the center. You're not specifying like a frame, but we are going to create a line. So it's going to be just a line that goes across the top. And again, you can have a point, a circle, and your emitter. So your emitter will be this shape, and it can send out objects from this shape. Well, we're going to have something that snows and just comes down in one direction, so a line is fine. Now, this is where the magic happens. Emitter cells. Right here. The array emitter cells attached to layer. That sentence really doesn't make sense in English. It should say something like the array of emitter cells attached to the layer. So as you can see here, it is an array of emitter cells. And what are cells? What are those things? Well, when you look at the little basketballs coming down, they're images, but they call them cells because you can put different things in those cells. So those cells, they get assigned an image, they get assigned all different kinds of properties on how to behave once they get emitted from our emitter. So that's what a cell is. And this is what we actually need to set as far as those little basketballs, and to give it velocity, a speed, which is a speed, a direction. We have to set up all those things. So I'm going to create another function to do that, and it will be I'll call it like generate emitter cells. Okay. I'll just copy this. If you watch a lot of my videos, you notice I do this a lot. I'll call the function before it's even created. And remember, that property right here is an array. So I want to return an array of emitter cells. CAEmitterCell. There we go. All right, cool. So let's create our variable to hold the cells. There we go. We'll instantiate it with an array, and then we'll return it like that. Okay, now we need to configure this thing. For this, we're going to just use one image, and that's something that we'll actually have to pass in here. So we'll create one cell like this, and then we'll assign some properties, and then toward the end, we'll add that cell to the collection of cells like this. Okay. One of the main things that you want to apply to this cell is an image. And to give it an image, it's called contents. And you can see here, object of type any. What we want for the contents is we actually want an image. And I don't have an image to reference here. I mean, I could reference what I have in my asset catalog, and that is this snowball. This is the snowball that's going to be falling down from the sky, the little basketball here. But, I don't want to do that because, remember, I want this to be reusable. So you can just take it and use it in a different project. And in a different project, you probably don't want to use these little basketballs. So we're going to modify our function a little bit here. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass in an image. So it'll be like emitter.get with image, and we'll pass in a UI image like that. And then what we'll need to do is pass in that image here too. Image. So we have it here. So generate emitter cells with image, UI image. It'll probably prompt us to update this here. I'll just do this. With emitter. What? Why is it saying that? Oh, okay. It's using this class right here. Because this is static, it can't call a non-static function, or this is called an instance function. This is considered a type function. And let me describe the difference between those two things, because this is important, and you'll see this in the documentation for Apple. A type function is a function that you don't have to instantiate the class to use. Now, you know how we use UIView.animate? Well, when we use that, we don't have to instantiate UIView, a UIView class, to be able to call the animate function, because the animate function is one of two things. It's called the type function, but it's either static or class, like that. And the difference between those two things, a static and a class, is a class you can override. So if I make another instance of this class and inherit this class emitter, then I can override this function get. But I don't really plan on doing anything like that, so I'm just going to keep it as static. So that's what a type function is. A type function or a type property is a function or a property where you don't have to instantiate the class to be able to use it. And an instance property, of course, is just the opposite. You have to instantiate the object in order to use that property or that function. So I just want to describe that to you guys. You're going to see that in Apple documentation if you're reading. It'll mention, you want to use this type property or this type function. You're like, what is a type function? What is that? Well, now you know. Okay, so here we're going to pass in the image, just like that. All right, cool. Now we have our image. Now we can assign it to the contents. And there's a trick to this here. It's not going to complain if I do this. Like, watch. If I build it, no problem. It's going to build. There's no problem there. But one thing you have to remember when you're using this emitter is if I try to run this, it's not going to work, because what it actually wants is the core graphics representation of that image. So you need to use the CG image. So it takes that UI image and gives it the core graphics representation of that image instead. All right, good. So will this work? Well, I don't know. Let's test it out and take a look. I mean, actually, I do know, but I want you guys to see if it will work or not. Okay, first it goes through the initial animations, and then now it should be emitting our image, but it's not. Why? Why isn't it? Well, there's more properties that we have to assign to these cells. And one of them is you have to tell it to be born. So right now, it's just the cell is pregnant, but it hasn't given birth to our image. Okay, so we have to tell it to be born. And the reason why I say it is because the property's name is called Birthrate. Take a look down here. It says the number of emitted objects created every second. And what we're going to do is we're just going to have it set to 1. And you might think, well, 1 second, that doesn't really seem like a lot, but it actually is. I don't think you guys will see anything, but let's just take a look. Yeah, you still don't see anything. And I think one of the things that we can do just as an experiment, we'll change this back after, is we're going to change the position. Let's make it 50. So basically what I'm doing is I'm lowering the emitter so it's down into a more viewable area. And then another thing I want to do too is let's take this call, and when we run it, we're basically going to skip over the initial animation and go straight for the emitter. We don't really need the self in this instance here. And I'm still not sure, actually, for real this time, I'm not sure if we'll actually see the images being emitted. Yeah, we don't. Okay, so there's a couple more properties that we need to add. Okay, so we have the birth rate. So now we have them being born, but now as soon as they're being born, they're dying right away. That's basically the best way to describe it, is they're being born and they're dying. So we have to tell the cell how long it should live for. And that is with the lifetime property. So it says right here, the lifetime of the cell in seconds. Okay, so we want it to live for, let's say, 5 seconds. Still nothing. That's surprising to me. Oh, you know why? Let me see something here. Okay, this is why right here. Because we're not using our class yet. We're still creating that blank emitter down here. Let's implement this. Okay, emitter. This is our class that we just created. Get, and we want to get it with an image. And what I'm going to use here is just an image literal. So what do we call it? Was it small? I actually forgot the name of our image. Ball small. Okay, so it's kind of a funny name. Ball small. There it is right there. There's our image literal. And that's very handy because we don't have to create an instance of a UI image and give it the string representation to pull our image out of the assets folder here. Okay, now let's try it and see what we get. Hey, there you go. Okay, it's perfect. So as you can see, the balls are being created every 1 second, but they're not going anywhere. So we've allowed them to be born, and we're having them live for 5 seconds. So as you can see, if you watch one of these balls, it'll disappear after 5 seconds. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to give it some velocity, a direction, I guess you could say. And we want them to, they're being created and they're being sent forth, but not in a direction. They're just being sent forth with no speed. Let's set that up. Let's set up a velocity here. I forgot to show you that description there. Okay, the initial velocity of the cell. Okay, good. So velocity is kind of like speed, right? And what's the type? So yeah, that's what I hate about Xcode. It's a CG float. Okay, good. So we'll just create a CG float here. CG is core graphics, so it's the core graphics representation of a float. And let's start with a number like 25. And you can experiment with these numbers just to see how fast that is. Okay, let's see what happens. We give it speed. Let's see where they go. Okay, that's great. We give it a velocity of 25, and they're going in the wrong direction. They're going up. Here we can see the default direction here is up. Well, luckily, we have a way to change that. So we want the cells to go in a different direction here, and that is called emission longitude. If you look at a globe, sometimes you'll notice that there's lines that go across and there's lines that go up and down. Well, the lines that go up and down, those are the longitude lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that longitude and we're going to reposition it. This is kind of tricky. This took me a while to figure out because there are not a lot of tutorials on this emitter here. There's not a lot of blog posts, that describe how to do this and explain in normal words what these things do. So it took me a while to figure it out. And one of the things that I learned from the longitude here is you want to give it a direction in radians. And I don't know about you, but I am not very good with radians. It's not intuitive to me to, set direction. I know like 45 degrees, 90 degrees, but I can't convert those radians in my head. So what I do is I have to do a formula here. And so what we want to do, it's going in one direction, it's going up. So we want it to go in the opposite direction, right? We want to turn it 180 degrees. And that's what this is right here, 180 degrees. And to convert 180 degrees to radians, what I have to do is take that 180 and then multiply it by pi divided by 180. Like that. So this is the formula to convert degrees to radians. And you can extract this if you wanted to. Now let's see how that looks. Comments coming in. Perfect. Okay, so now they're going in the right direction. But what's the problem here? Why are they disappearing? Because remember, we only give them a lifetime of 5 seconds. So this is how far they get at this velocity. This is how far they get at 5 seconds. They barely get past the dribble. So we want them to live long enough to reach the bottom of the screen. And that is it's about 10 times this amount. Let's make them last 50 seconds. And then that should do it. And we just take a quick look. Okay, this is perfect. We have them being born, they're living for 50 seconds, and they're going in the right direction. But notice they're falling straight down. It's, we want it to be a little bit more random than this, right? Wouldn't it be cool if we could say, I like them going straight down, but I want a variation. I want them to go a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left, randomly. Well, there is a way to do that. Now, the cool thing about the CAEmitterCell is a lot of the properties that they have, they allow you to do exactly what we want to do, to add a variation to it, like a random variation to the number that we set. For example, if we look at the emission property here, emission has a longitude, but it has something else too. Oops, yeah, look at emission and then range right here. And look at this. The angle in radians, again, there's radians, defining a cone around the emission angle. What does that mean? Luckily, I'm going to explain it to you. And I'm going to explain it visually too, because I like to do that in my videos. Okay, so let's go back to our view here. Now notice a cell gets created on this line, but as it falls straight down in one line. Well, what this emission range does is it'll get created, but now you can define a cone shape going downward, giving it a radians. Well, radians are, again, for me, they're hard to think with. So think about it like degrees. So you can have a straight line coming right down, and then you can have 10 degrees on one side and 10 degrees on the other. Or you can have 45 degrees on one side and 45 degrees on the other. That's what we're going to supply. We're going to give it degrees, and it will apply it to both sides of that straight line going straight down from the longitude. Okay, so here, again, I don't know radians, but I do know degrees. So I'm going to look at like a 45 degree here and convert that to radians by multiplying it by pi divided by 180. And that will give me 45 degrees on each side of that emission. All right, now let's take a look at this. Awesome. See how much better that looks? And notice too, some of the balls do fall straight down, but some of them fall at going one direction, and some of them fall at another direction. And it's not strictly 45 degrees. Some, like this one right here, is falling at maybe 10 degrees off the center line. So it's totally random. We gave it a range, and we're telling it, emit this image and make it go within this cone shape, 45 degrees on each side. So it sends it out, and it just looks more random, more natural. All right, good. Now we want to do something else too. These balls, they look kind of small. And so what I want to do is I want to make them a little bit smaller, but then I want to use that variation again too. So instead of just making it smaller and having them all one size, I'm going to use that range property again and say, okay, well, make it this big, but I'm going to give it a range so it can be a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. We'll give it a scale. And I don't have to give it this scale. By default, the scale is 1. 1 means that's the normal size. But I did create that image a little bit too big. So that's why I'm making it a little bit smaller. So 0.4. I'm going to scale it down to 40% of its normal size. That's what that means. And let me look at something else. If you guys need more information on this, you can always hold down Option and click on it this way. Or you can also just open up this side panel, make sure you're on the question mark, and just put your cursor right on that property. Okay, specifies the scale factor applied to the cell. All right, good. That makes sense. And this is great. A lot of these properties I notice, they'll also tell you how you can add that variation. So it says, the scale of the cell will vary by a random amount within the range specified by scale range. All right, cool. And that's what we're going to use. Oh yeah, and this is what I want to see right here. The default value of this property is 1. Yeah, so 1 is the normal size. Okay, so the next thing we want to add is scale range right here. It specifies the range over which the scale value can vary. All right, good. And so what that means is if I put 0.1, what that means is when it creates the size of the cell, it's going to make it 0.4, and then it's going to apply the range. So the range is only 0.1, so that means it can go down to 0.3 or go up to 0.5. So it's not like a big range. But if I give it, something like 0.3, then that means it can go up to 0.7. It'll start out at 0.4, but it can go up to 0.7. Of course, it can be 0.5, 0.6, 0.7. Because we're telling it can go 3 up or 3 down. So it can go to 0.1, which is super small. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Oh man, that looks awesome. So there you go, guys. We have different size. We have some smaller ones, some bigger ones. And it's probably like this one right here. That's probably the 0.4. And then you just see bigger ones and smaller ones because it's using that range. It's totally randomizing it for us. Okay, good. So the last thing we need to do is we need to switch back that position because see, notice they're being created like on this imaginary line right here. So we just want to move that back up to 0. And that should do it. And here, let's just comment this out so you can see the full animation again and how this all works together. Okay, you get the animation, the extra B comes in, the hello winks, and then you have your falling dribble balls, those icons. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial learning about emitters. I taught you how to create an emitter and how you can add image to it. We can reuse this class in the future. You can just pass in any image you want and it'll snow that image down. And then we also gave it, I taught you about how you can give it a birth rate, how you can give it its lifetime, how long it should live. I showed you how you can control its velocity, its direction, and then its size too. And then how you can vary, the direction, how you can vary the size of the object. And just understand something else too. We only passed in one image to be emitted, but you can pass in many objects. Because take a look here. Remember, this is emitter cells. And what we're doing is we're creating a cell with just one image, but you can pass in many cells with images. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want to have the little basketballs coming down and you want different color basketballs coming down, maybe you have 8 different color basketballs, dribble basketballs coming down. You can do that. It's up to your own creativity and how you program that. So I just want to let you know the possibilities. And then in this tutorial, we're only having the dribble balls come down in one direction. You can create an emitter right in the center and have them go out in all different directions using different emitter shapes. You can, if we wanted to, we could change this direction so it looks like a wind is blowing and there's bubbles flying, going across the screen from one direction instead of falling straight down. Or you can just put the emitter bar right down at the bottom and have things floating up into the air. It's up to you guys. Use your imagination, your own creativity. And I'd love to see your stuff. So if you create something with this emitter, put it on Twitter because I'd love to see your work. I'd love to see, what you guys are coming up with. I know there's a lot of creative people out there. Okay, great. Thanks for watching. If you like this tutorial, give it a thumbs up. Consider sharing it with your friends if you want to teach them how to use the emitter. And subscribe because I keep coming out with new and cool tutorials like this. Most of my tutorials are around user experience and UI and cool things you can do with the animation. So thanks, guys.